howdy all. Grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to talk about appraising the value of cluster jewels in trade leagues. Now, cluster jewels are something that can be quite tricky to put some sort of price on. There's two main things that make them valuable. The first one is the inherent power of the cluster jewel in question just as a crafting base. So imagine that you took that item and you smashed it with an orb of scouring, deleting all of its mods. Just based upon the item level of the cluster jewel and the enchant that's on it, would that be something that is inherently a valuable base? Or on the flip side, is it a basically valueless base? And the way that you can look at this is by looking at the website POE.ninja. POE.ninja is an economic aggregator. It has various ways of essentially spying on trades that players do between each other and trying to come up with some sort of estimate as to what specific cluster jewels are worth from that. So it breaks them down into 5 different level brackets. So item level 1 to 49, 50 to 67, 68 to 74, 75 to 83, and 84 plus. At each of these level brackets, new mods become available to roll on an item, and this generally means that the higher tier ones are the higher item level ones are more desirable. But there are occasions where actually people prefer a lower tier because some of these new mods may not be things that they're trying to chase. Generally speaking, though, 75 and up can roll almost everything. 84 and up can roll absolutely everything possible, and 68 to 74 can roll most of the important mods, but there are quite a few that do require the 75 plus. And that will be reflected when you have a look at the various prices of the different bases at different item levels. Secondly, there is a question of whether it's a large, medium, or small cluster jewel. Essentially, these can just be seen as totally different items. And then there's a number of passives that it has on it. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a look at the level 75 to 83 bracket for large cluster jewels and get a sense as to what's valuable there. So 75 to 83 is what you'll encounter most in endgame mapping, and also in a lot of other endgame activities like heists. You'll find that these are the main things that drop. And you'll see here that all of the most valuable ones have exactly 8 passives on them. However, you'll see something very interesting when you look at 84 plus, and that will be reversed, and suddenly it'll be the 12 passive ones that are often the most valuable. So you see that the very most valuable cluster jewels in the current league are 10% increased spell damage, 12 passive, item level 84. The reason for this is that when you have a level 84 jewel, it gains access to a new mod. And here we're going to jump to the other resource in question, which is POEDB. POEDB is a website that data mines a lot of information about the game files. And the important mod that gets added at 84, generally speaking, is powerful. So potent is a mod that comes online at level 1, so it's always available on clusters. Added small passives have 25% increased effect. Powerful comes online at 84 and grants some 35% increased effect. Now, the very important thing with that is that 35% increased effect on any cluster jewel that has 12% as a modifier is quite a bit better than 25%. Likewise on 10% as well. So for instance, if you have 12% increased cold damage and then you amp that up by 35%, you're adding 4%. Whereas if you had added 25%, you'd be adding 3. Likewise for 10, it's the difference between adding 2% and 3%. So it ends up being a pretty significant upgrade. And that's why when you have a level 84 cluster jewel base, a lot of people are trying to chase both the powerful mod and potentially some of the other prefixes and suffixes as well. And that can mean that these have a lot more utility as a crafting base. So that's why there's some interest in 12 passive ones at all, for that matter. Most people do prefer 8 early on, but later on in a league, when you're trying to fully min-max the character, there's a lot of merit to getting the maximum number of passives as well. You'll also see, again, like if we have a look at medium cluster jewels, and let's just filter to show only mediums, you'll see that the very most valuable one is 3% increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills, level 84. Why is that? What's 3% plus 35% of 3? It's more than 4, which then gets rounded down to 4, whereas 3% plus 25% ends up as 3.75, which gets rounded down to 3. So that means that the powerful mod is extremely powerful. no pun intended, on these clusters, and having 4% increased effective non-curse auras from your skills is a huge upgrade on having only 3%, and as a result, these 6 passive ones are extremely valuable as well. So, ultimately though, what's the solution? The first thing is that if something doesn't have the maximum or minimum possible number of nodes on it, or one more than the minimum. So that means that for large cluster jewels, it's got to be 8, 9, or 12. If it's 10 or 11, it's never going to be a perfect base. For medium cluster jewels, 4 and 5 are essentially equivalent because if you want to take the minimum number of nodes, they end up being equivalent to each other. For 4, you can, because you want the dual socket, and you can take 2 nodes total. But for 5, you can also take the same number and pick up everything of value on it. So you end up with the same requirements to get everything of value with the shortest possible path through on a medium cluster, whether it's got 4 or 5 nodes. But then some people also want 6 nodes, and so for that reason, medium cluster jewels, the number of there's no hard and fast rule on the number of passives. Sometimes it'll be 4, sometimes it'll be 5, sometimes it'll be 6. But ultimately what I suggest you do here is have this page open while you are trying, like once you're wanting to appraise a bunch of cluster jewels, and then have a quick look through, look at the top 10 different ones, or look at everything that's over about 50 chaos and say, okay, what is it that's here? So over 50 chaos we've got, and this is looking at 84 plus. Actually, let's just look at all of them. So over 50 chaos, we have about 10 different clusters available. So there's 3% increased effective non-curse auras, 5 at low item levels. Low item level ones can be, like, they just don't get traded very much, so they can be a bit misleading. So let's ignore the ones that are 1 in 50, but look at 75 and up. 12% increased lightning damage. 8 different nodes on it is quite valuable. So you're going to want to price those high. Likewise for axe attacks dealing damage with hits and ailments, axe and swords, sorry, hits and ailments, 8 passives, that's valuable. And you just want to check, you might find that there's a list of about 15 of them that you want to check to see if you've got any of, and also you will know if you've got any level 84 clusters. Level 84 clusters only drop in fairly specific circumstances, so you can only get these from running, generally speaking, you will get them occasionally from running tier 16 Delirious maps because you'll kill a magic or rare monster, but you will also get them, and mostly you'll get them from the Delirium Mirror in tier 17 and higher maps. And you're not going to stumble across tier 17 and higher maps because they require you to use various watchstones from Cirrus that are not sustainable. So that's the crafting base side of things, and that's a quick look at the basic outline of how you would go about trying to put some sort of price tag on a cluster jewel that you find. Now, the second thing that's important is that some of the value can be not the base itself, but the specific combination of mods that you've got on it. And for that, what you can do is start with the following assumption. If it's easy to roll a combination of mods or an equivalent or better substitute for that combination of mods, then it's not going to be particularly valuable. That combination is not going to add much value. What you will need is a combination of mods that is simultaneously desirable, not necessarily to everyone, but at least to one semi-popular niche, and also that has a couple of mods on it that are fairly hard to roll either individually or together. As far as assessing the desirability side of mods, that's just going to take play experience. That's going to take a bit of a sense as to what builds are popular in the meta, but if in doubt, my simple rule is, if in doubt, if the base is cheap, just throw the rolled jewel into a 1 Exalt tab and just watch what happens. If no one messages you, then drop that tab down to 100C. If no one messages you, 80C. No one messages you, 60C. And the worst that's usually going to happen here is that you're going to end up selling a combination of mods. Maybe on the market it would be 75C. No one buys it when you list it at 80. You drop it down to 60. You get 15 people send you a message saying, hey, I want to buy that. You sell it to one of them and you go, you know what? If I'd done my research, I would have got 15C more, but oh well, I got something out of it anyway. I got 60C for something that I didn't think I was going to be able to keep, or that I was going to be able to get anything for, and that's all right. The next thing that's important, though, is to have a look at the rarity of the specific mods that you've got. What I want to do here is imagine that you've got a minion cluster jewel, and it has the following combination of mods on it. So it's got Renewal, it's got Rotten Claws, and it's got Call to the Slaughter. And that's the 3 mods on this large cluster jewel that we're imagining that we've got. Now, if you have a look at this weight column, that is a number that identifies how rare the mods that specific mod is to roll on the item. The higher the number, the more common it is. So a roll of 500 is exactly twice as rare as a mod that's weight is 1000. A mod that is 63 is approximately 16 times as rare as a mod that is 1000. And so based on that, you say that Renewal, Rotten Claws, and Call to the Slaughter are all individually pretty common mods. And that means that they're going to be fairly easy to roll simultaneously. This means that you haven't added much value to that jewel by rolling those 3 mods together, even if they were particularly good together. I actually think they are pretty good together, although I need to have a quick look. Impale can be quite hard to use. So, it's not like these are bad mods. It's just that they're not going to add a huge amount of value. On the flip side, what will add a lot of value is getting a combination of rare mods that are good together as well. And sometimes that's not really an option. So if you have a look here, 2 of the rare mods that we've got here are Skeletal Atrophy, Raise and Pillage. Now these really don't work very well together. One of them here is encouraging you to focus on dealing fire damage with your minions, and it pays you off for doing so. Skeletal Atrophy, on the other hand, converts physical damage to chaos damage, which is nice and all, but doesn't really have any strong synergy with Raise and Pillage. And I think that's the case with, Primordial Bond is another example of something that just has no synergy with almost anything else on these large cluster jewels. On the flip side, you have a node like Vicious Bite that is both extremely rare and extremely, extremely potent. And this can synergize with a lot of the other options as well. So, an example of a large minion cluster jewel that might have quite a bit of value coming out of the various mods that are on it. Imagine that you had Vicious Bite in conjunction with, say, Skeletal Atrophy. Now, not many people are going to necessarily want this combination together, but if someone does, they're probably going to be willing to pay quite a bit for it, because there's just not going to be many of them on the market, especially if the other 2 mods on the jewel are good as well. So you can do this with large cluster jewels, with medium cluster jewels, and with small cluster jewels. And as I say, I will put the link to the PoEDB pages for each of those separately below. But I think it's also important to recognize that cluster jewels don't just have the various notable nodes. So with this, particularly with a small cluster jewel, where the other mods that are not the notable nodes are their most powerful, a lot of the power is actually tied up in these specific nodes that are down, in these specific modifiers that are down below. So what these modifiers do, these affixes do, is they grant an additional ability to every small node. To every small slot on the on the jewel in question. These tend to be better on 3 small node jewels. So, for instance, if you had one of the best jewels you could possibly find in the current league, would be one that had Tier 1 roll of Exile, added small passive skills also grant plus 7 to 8 chaos resistance, in conjunction with the powerful node, and have this on a 12% chaos resistance base. So what this would end up with is a jewel where you have, between these 2 mods, just from this mod, you have 12% baseline, plus 8% from the of Exile suffix is 20% chaos resistance per node taken, plus 35% effect for those nodes. So it ends up that each single node that you take is 27% chaos resistance, and that is a total, just from these nodes alone, that is a total of 81% chaos resistance on a single jewel that takes you 4 attribute points. Now, every build out there is going to want this unless they have, unless they've got very unusual needs like Chaos Inoculation builds. Getting 81% Chaos resistance for 4 passive points is phenomenal. And so that would be the sort of jewel that, even though it's only got 2 mods on it, it's already extraordinarily good. And then potentially, if you got 2 other nodes, even if they weren't very good, like let's say that you also added on tier 3 of the meteor, added small passives, grant +4 to all attributes. So that's going to be raised by 35%. That's going to be another 5 to all attributes. Not a great mod, but something you can use. And let's say you also got tier 3 life for 10 raised up to 13 extra life. So that'd be a total of 39 life and 15 to all attributes, in addition to having your 81% chaos resistance. That's a sort of example of an extraordinary small cluster jewel where almost all of the value is actually in the modifiers, but none of that is coming from notables. In fact, this jewel would be worse if you wound up adding a notable onto it. So that's something that you want to keep in mind as well. Broadly speaking, on large cluster jewels, the most of the power is in the notables. On medium cluster jewels, it is mostly in the notables again, but sometimes there can be powerful stats that you're getting from the small passives. So, for instance, 4% fire damage over time multiplier. That's a pretty good mod. That's pretty good passive node to have on your passive tree. Likewise, any of the other DOT multis are like that. Whereas some of the others are a little bit less impressive, like minions have 12% increased life or 15% increased critical strike chance. But in all of these cases, these nodes add a bit of extra value, but most of the power is going to come from the various prefixes that add an additional notable onto the jewel. For larges, it's almost all the power is in the notables. For mediums, most of the power is the notables, but the small nodes matter. And for smalls, it really does vary a lot. And it's going to vary from jewel to jewel, and you'll just have to, sort of follow the meta to get a sense as to exactly what's ideal. Okay, so quickly to recap here, the things that make a cluster jewel valuable. Firstly, there is just the basis of inherent value as a crafting tool, because of the opportunity of crafting it into something amazing, although it's not currently a usable item. And the way to check whether you've got any value there is by jumping to the website poe.ninja, link below. For the large, medium, and small cluster jewels, respectively, the value is firstly mostly in the notables. Secondly, a balance of the notables and any modifiers to the small passives, but with the notables being the stronger side of that. And then thirdly, again, it's a balance between the notables and the small passives, but the small passives tend to be more. The small passive modifiers tend to be more important on the small jewels. So that's what's going to determine whether the jewel is desirable or not. And then there's a question of how rare it is to roll that exact combination of mods, and also whether there's any budget substitutions that exist in large quantities that people might end up getting. Anyways, I'm going to leave it at that point. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I hope you have fun with your Varlorbs, and I will see you around.